So I did it. I completed the Goodreads goal I've been trying since 2021. I read 12 books cover to cover this year. That might not seem like a lot, but I attempted it for 4 years and really only got one or two, probably because I was still in school. But this year I did it, and so to celebrate, and because I want to, I'm going to give a little overview of the books I read and give you my ratings and what I thought. I'm going to start with my lowest rated and move to my highest rated, and there's one book that I didn't rate, so I'll talk about that somewhere in between. Also, I know it's super satisfying to have people hold up the book while they talk about it, but I'm a believer in using the public library system, so I don't actually have copies of the books that I'm talking about except for a few, and I'm just gonna pop them up on the screen for all of them. So this will probably be in two parts. Okay, so actually my only 1-star review of the year was Long Live the Pumpkin Queen by Shay Earnshaw. Goodreads gave this a 3.84 star rating, and I gave it a 1-star rating. Sorry, I had to move because my neighbor was doing Who Even Knows on the other side of the wall. But I think this might be the worst book I've ever read, with the exception of one that was self-published. This is the worst professionally published book I've ever read. It is so hard to identify this as a sequel to anything Tim Burton. I appreciate the attempt, but all of that spooky, magical Tim Burton essence was not there at all. And the writing was terrible. It was overly predictable and also kind of destroyed the plot of the movie and made it irrelevant. So I don't recommend this at all, and I did not think it was it did not do Tim Burton justice. You know what I mean? Things might have been different if this was marketed towards middle grade, but it was YA teen, and that definitely is not good writing for a YA teen book, so I can't get on board with it. Okay, next is Donuts and Other Proclamations of Love by Jared Reck. 4.17 stars on Goodreads, 2 stars for me. I'm all for a good slow burn romance, but I remember thinking this was a little too slow burn, and I was frustrated that stuff wasn't really happening. It still might have gotten 3 stars if it wasn't for the way that it ended. I really hate political polarization in fiction books. I don't really like they're the good bad guys, we're the good guys. It's messy, especially when the rest of the book had absolutely nothing to do with any of that. Just came completely out of nowhere. They also spend the end building and building and building to this one specific event that doesn't even end up happening. So it felt like a lot of build up for nothing, and I did not enjoy it at all. Except for the fact that the girl in it kind of reminded me of my friend, and I actually read her character in my friend's voice, and I enjoyed that part. That was really cool. Okay, up next is Matters of the Heart by Kelly Irving. This one is kind of on me. Okay, I'm probably not the audience that Amish romances are geared towards. To be indiscriminate, I read a Christian romance 2 years ago, and I gave it a pretty similar rating, so. A lot of these novels somehow end up being sermons. They're just all very preachy, and they have a lot of Bible verses in them, and I'm not a fan. Don't ask me what the title has to do with anything in the book, because I cannot tell you. I don't think it was mentioned a single time, honestly. It was just a very slow, very uneventful romance, and I couldn't do it. I did finish the book because I was very curious, but I don't think I'll ever read an Amish romance again, or any other kind of romance, really, because religious romances, because they're just not very good. It just came out in July, and it has a 4.5 star rating on Goodreads, as opposed to my 2 star. So obviously there is an audience for this. I am not part of that audience, so I did it to myself, really. Next is The Weight of Feathers by Anna Marie McLemore. I probably would have given this 2.5 stars if it was an option, but it was on Goodreads, so I just ended up giving it 2 stars. Honestly, it wasn't the worst book I've ever read. The concept was very creative, and I really enjoyed it. It's hard to even pinpoint what I didn't like about it. I just didn't find the characters very compelling. I thought it was slow. I thought it was not very convincing. It didn't really hold my attention that well, and I just found it kind of dull, honestly. And it was frustrating because it was such a good concept, and I wish it had a better plot. Oh, and it got 3.75 stars on Goodreads for what it's worth. Okay, let's talk about Stranger Care by Sarah Centellas. 4.26 stars on Goodreads. I gave it 3 stars. Very mixed opinions on this book all around, including from me. It is not a work of fiction. It is a memoir. It is the only memoir I read this year. And honestly, it made me cry harder than any other book I've ever read, and I almost gave it 5 stars just because it had such a deep emotional toll on me. Unfortunately, I found the author to be a little bit insufferable. And if you read the reviews on it, I think you find a lot of people that agree with me. Granted, this is not a work of fiction, but I just said that I don't like political polarization, and this author actually takes it one step further and basically implies several times in the book that people that don't align with her politically are not fit to be parents. that certainly did not sit right with me. Overall, bad choices, good choices aside, it was a very compelling story about a couple that fosters a little girl, and I really enjoyed a lot of the insights on fostering and motherhood. So those are just my thoughts. Next up is Maria by Michelle Moran. This was the last book I read this year, and honestly, it was not a bad way to wrap up the year. I probably would have been in the 3.5 star zone. It has a 4.22 star rating on Goodreads. There are fictional and real elements to this story. It's sort of Maria von Trapp telling the story of what really happened in The Sound of Music. It was not like the movie, as I'm sure you could have guessed. I found it to be very interesting, although somewhat heartbreaking and soul-crushing if you're a fan of the movie. Oscar Hammerstein is a character in this book, which is really interesting. It's kind of like the Saving Mr. Banks of The Sound of Music, if you've ever seen Saving Mr. Banks. There was some stuff about the way that this book was written that I didn't particularly enjoy, but that might just be a stylistic thing. Overall, this might be the first book in my ratings list here that I can say, yes, I totally recommend this book. A Danger to Herself and Others by Alyssa Sheenmel. This was the first book I actually liked more than Goodreads. It gave it 3.86 stars, and I gave it 4. This was the first book I read this year, and I honestly couldn't put it down, and then I talked to my friends about it, and I felt really stupid because they were all like, oh yeah, I saw that twist coming from a mile away, and I did not see the twist coming. Instead of being one of my favorite books of the year, it's probably also one of the books I read the fastest. I just really was gripped by it. I don't know how else to explain it. There's a lot of controversy surrounding this book and saying that it kind of gives it a bad stigma or it's unrealistic when it portrays mental health. I can sympathize with that, but I felt like I didn't really expect it to give a realistic portrayal of mental health, so I wasn't really bothered by it, if that makes sense. Overall, I will continue to be a fan of this book, even if I am the only one left. So that's my thoughts. It might be controversial. I am so sorry I keep messing with my hair during this recording. It bothers me a lot. Anyway, Heartless by Marissa Meyer. Goodreads and I agree that this is a 4-star book. And if you've read anything by Marissa Meyer, you probably know that she's an incredible world builder and pretty good at plot and character development too. As a writer myself, I was in my glory because of how awesome the world building was, and as a reader, I was up and down and all over the place emotionally. So this was just a ride, really. I don't really know what else to say. I feel like I'm better about talking about what I don't like than what I do, and maybe that's something I should work on. If you like the whimsical magic of Alice in Wonderland and kind of the spooky darkness to it, I feel like you'd really like this book, and you'd be happy to see some of the characters fleshed out and given stories of their own. Next is A Daughter of Fair Verona by Christina Dodd. I like this more than Goodreads again. I gave it 4 stars. Goodreads gave it like 3.7-ish. This is an alternate reality where Romeo and Juliet didn't die and they went on to have 8 kids. I am a huge hater of the play by Shakespeare. I did not like Romeo and Juliet, particularly the characters of Romeo and Juliet. So it's really satisfying and also amusing and kind of annoying to see them as adults being exactly what you would expect of Romeo and Juliet as adults. I'm just going to leave it there. Somehow I did not see the plot twist coming. I don't know if this one was as obvious. I feel like I'm really dense when it comes to plot twists, and I don't see them coming ever. But this one really was like, whoa, for me, and I enjoyed it a lot, and it really kept me on my toes. So that's just me. I would say if this didn't say it was part of a series, it says like it's number 1 in the series. If it didn't say that, I probably would have given it 2 stars because I was so mad about the way that it ended. So hopefully number 2 will come out like this year or next, and we'll get to resolve some things. It's like a brand new book. It just came out in the summer, I believe, so we'll see. I'm quickly running out of time, so I'm going to talk about the book that I did not rate. It's Time for God by Father Jacques Philippe. It doesn't feel right to rate spiritual reading, so I'm just going to say that I read it, and if you are interested in mental prayer at all, this is a great place to start, and I would recommend reading it. So that's really all I'm going to say about it. Like this video for part 2. Hopefully I'll see you next time.